Just around 15 minutes until your ABC News. Thanks for being with me this morning, and thanks to those who have been sharing with me how you're doing today. I've been asking you to tell me what you're up to, what you're looking at. So quite a few people working on their cars today. Bit of a trend there. Tell me also what you're seeing and hearing and how you're feeling. 1300 630 222 or send me a text on 0487 993 222. I wonder if you've heard of SAD. SAD stands for Seasonal Affective Disorder, and it's a type of depression that can occur during specific seasons and is thought to be linked to changes in light exposure and its impact on the body's natural rhythms. So could all of the rain that Queensland's been experiencing lately and the lack of sunshine normally associated with Queensland be affecting our mental state? Psychology consultant and author Dr. Jo Lukens is with me. Good morning.
Good morning, Susan.
Thanks so much for being with me. So how does prolonged rain affect mood, especially in the regions like Queensland?
Yes, well, I think you've got thousands of listeners that can probably answer that question just as well as I can. So we do know that the seasons and the weather obviously does impact our mood. And, you know, I ran into someone yesterday who said how much they were enjoying the rain, and I thought, I haven't heard many people say that.
No, that ended like a month and a half for me.
Yeah, that's right. So we do know that for many people, the weather, particularly when it is a little gloomy, particularly when it's affecting us the way that it is, and when it has significant impacts on our lives, which of course is what we must remember through this conversation, is the impacts have varied for listeners. But we do know those feelings of lethargy and frustration can come along, and as you said, we see it in some of the recognised disorders related to weather. Sadness, as our serotonin levels decrease without sunlight, it can very much impact our mental health.
Because for me, I often think of the happy colours as being those bright pink and orange and yellow and those sorts of colours. Is it the colour or is it the lack of light? What really drives it?
Well, most of it is around the light. Definitely that is the case. And in fact, in Queensland, we're more likely to be aware of seasonal affective disorder because people want to come to us. Yeah. You know, so there are many people, genuinely, there are people down south who will, you know, navigate themselves north, and particularly for those in North Queensland and far North Queensland, you know, where you do get more light, that's more helpful for people during winter months. And any one of us that have travelled overseas, you know, if you've been in London in the midst of winter, you know what it's like when, you know, you don't see any light until 9 a.m. and then it's long gone by 4 p.m. So
how do these kind of what would normally be considered, I guess, winter blues, how does that differ from depression, typical depression? Yeah,
typical depression. So the first thing to mention is it is recognised as a condition by psychiatrists and psychologists and medical practitioners. But what we see with SAD, or seasonal affective disorder, is it is typically experienced during the winter months when sunlight is scarce. So we see those seasonal changes, and it often includes for people low mood, their lethargy, impact on appetite and so forth. So we see those effects. Lots
of flow-on effects. Hearing from psychology consultant Dr. Jo Lukens, so how can Queenslanders who normally it's not really something you think of too much here, how can those of us who are normally experiencing the sunny climate support people who might be experiencing SAD in other parts of the world, or even here in Queensland with the rainy and overcast weather?
I think one of the most helpful things we can do is recognise the effects of the weather on our mood, and I think that if we can see something, we can do something about it. That I think when we don't pay attention to our mental health and our well-being, then, you know, things can creep up on us and we can suddenly go, wow, how did I get to this position? So I think just being aware that other people's experiences are very different. You know, listening to some of the stories from this morning through the show, you know, we're hearing lots of different experiences, and even though we may not know what that is for someone to go through an experience, trying to empathise with it and understand that it can be quite challenging for people. The really important thing is that the effects of weather on mental health are recognised by health professionals. So that's a really great place to start if people are struggling with that, to go and talk to your GP or some other health professional.
So what changes can we make to try to avoid it or alleviate those symptoms?
Yeah, so one of the good news part of this is that lifestyle factors can make a difference. So the obvious one probably is to try and get outside into some daylight when you can. I mean, that's generally a recommendation even around sleep regulation, is we would typically say to people, expose yourself to some daylight early in the morning, because that helps to regulate your body in relation to sleep. If, some people who are really in quite... do I want to say dark climates, or where there isn't a lot of sunlight, might even buy things like light boxes and so forth. You generally don't particularly need those in Queensland, although, I'm not going to say that nobody needs them. But we know that anything that can help to regulate our internal clock, and then all of our usual things, some physical activity is really helpful, whether that be through exercise or getting out into the garden, whether it be walking the dog, those sorts of things, going for a walk with a friend, those sorts of factors we know will help us with our mental health anyway, but particularly when the weather conditions aren't great, that those are good strategies to go to as well, in terms of that and our nutrition and all the usual hydration things that we would look at.
Well, I have noticed that whenever there is a very brief break in the weather, I've seen people going out and going for their walks or their jogs or their rides, just, I think, to get out of the house, but also to just get themselves moving.
Yes, absolutely. And people were definitely drawn to that. Where I live, there was a break in the weather on Saturday, and it was suddenly like the world seemed a brighter place. I even got a load of washing dried on the line. I think it was there for long enough. But even that sort of, and even if the weather isn't that great and it's safe to do so in your local area, even a walk with a brolly, might be something to do as well, just to get some of that physical activity. Because of course it makes sense, doesn't it, that sadness and feelings of depression can be exacerbated if we're sitting at home and we're not doing much and we're kind of, being more sedentary.
Get the gumboots on and go jump in puddles.
Even better. Even better.
Let's book it in the calendar. I'm sure we'll get some more rain in North Queensland. Dr. Jo Lukens, thank you very much.
Thanks, Susan.
We'll go jump in some puddles together. We'll book it in the diary. A puddles meeting. It will start a new trend. Dr. Jo Lukens said she's very excited about that. You are on ABC Queensland. And